Hey friends, welcome to episode 32 of the Way Too Indiecast. We've got two very special guests on today's show as the star and director of The Diary of a Teenage Girl, Bel Powley and Marielle Heller, respectively, join us to talk about their film, which has been heralded as one of the most honest and unfiltered portraits of female adolescence and sexual anxiety put on a movie screen in recent memory. I'll also be joined shortly by our very own Ananda to discuss that movie, The Diary of a Teenage Girl, as well as examine the state of female representation in film and media today. We have an awesome show for you, and I'm your host, Bernard Boo, coming to you from the Bay Area in California, and joining me from Los Angeles, California, just a few hundred miles south of me is Ananda Dillon. Hi, Ananda.
Hey there.
Oh man, I'm excited for the show. I think we've got a good consistent theme running throughout the whole thing. But
hmm
before we get to any of that, we have to start, as we always do, with our indie picks of the week. Ananda, what have you got for us?
So there's a lot of good stuff coming out this week, strangely, even though I kind of always bemoan that August is real hit or miss, like either big blockbusters or like absolute duds. But I'm really excited for everyone to see Noah Baumbach's latest, his second this year, Mistress America. And I will start by saying I don't always like Noah Baumbach, so it's kind of interesting that I'm recommending this film. I probably like every other of his films actually. And did not prefer While We're Young, his last one. But this one is definitely more along the lines of Frances Ha, if you saw that one a couple years ago, also starring Greta Gerwig. And this one is sort of touching on his love of like millennial generation, egotistical, fatuous, um, self-involved young people. And sort of lovingly poking fun at them while also letting their their better sides shine. And I maybe sort of as a late side millennial, an older millennial, maybe sort of identify with these characters, and that's probably why I find them
Right.
so fascinating and hilarious, because even in their ridiculousness I do see aspects of myself there, and of my friends and people I know. But it's starring, like I said, Greta Gerwig, Lila Kirk, and they basically play two young women. One of them, a college freshman. Greta Gerwig's character is like in her 30s, and they are basically the girl in college is just getting to know New York City and meets up with her soon to be stepsister as their parents are going to be marrying, and just sort of finds herself caught up in the like greatness of this woman who is just a whirlwind of energy and egotism, and yet like um all involved in like the get like jet setter go getter 30 something lifestyle. So um it's a really great movie. It's really well put together. I actually found myself loving the soundtrack and realized later it's because it's mostly all 80s songs, which is
Mm.
kind of an interesting choice, I thought, considering a lot of millennials' obsession with the 80s. Um, and stylistically, it's great. It's got a lot of interesting banter that really felt like a little Woody Allen-esque. I do sort of see a lot of similarities to Woody Allen in the like neuroticism of his characters that Noah Baumbach likes to play with. But I also just love the love of New York. He likes to play off that a lot, and it's just a really funny, well put together film that kind of feels like a play. Like Shakespearean back and forthing, like you're tossing lines around like a ball.
Yes.
Everyone's really on top of it, and it's just really smart, even as you're realizing how sort of ridiculous it is that no one talks like this, and could there really be such people in this world? But somehow it just all works. So yeah, you've seen this one?
I loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I
hmm
loved Mistress America. I think there's this volley of dialogue
hmm
near the end of the movie that involving like six, seven characters, which is
Yep.
just so deftly handled. It was pretty. You just start to kind of admire the craftsmanship of that writing as you're watching. It's pretty amazing. And like you, I much prefer this to Baumbach's While We're Young, which also came out this year.
hmm
Much better offering. That's a great pick. I second that one. My indie pick of the week is called Bending Steel.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Bending Steel, and it's yeah, I was offered this film by this guy. He told me about this movie, asked if I would cover it, and it's called Bending Steel, and it's about a guy who bends metal. And I was like, oh God, this is not gonna be. I didn't know how good this was gonna be. I mean, I wasn't expecting much, to be honest,
Hmm.
which maybe wasn't fair of me. But I watched the movie, and it was such a surprise how just how engaging and how fascinating this was. It's a documentary about this guy named Chris Sheck, who's a New York City native, and he's obsessed with bringing back the old time strongman acts of Coney Island, like at the turn of the last century. And it at first, I mean, you'd think it would be like kind of a sports doc
Hmm.
about this weird kind of fringe activity, but it's really a character portrait about Chris Sheck, and he's this guy who bends steel in his storage space, like between he puts it between his legs and bends these like 2-inch bars of metal, and he's obsessed with it, and he actually loves it, and he says that he gets just as much pleasure and fulfillment from that activity than most people get from real like human relationships. He doesn't have any friends.
Wow.
Yeah, like the only people he associates with are other strongmen, and he's this
Okay.
like kind of weird guy, but he's kind of a small guy. He actually looks scrawny when you first look at him,
Hmm.
but he's in incredibly good shape, and it is amazing watching him bend the steel. It's a fascinating documentary because not only is he trying to overcome this challenge of bending this really thick um, 2-inch bar of steel for this Coney Island show, the first Coney Island strongman show in many years. But he has a second challenge of performing in front of people. He doesn't interact with people, so being a performer just does not come naturally to this guy. Love this movie. It's really dark. It's really intimate, really personal. Actually shot very well. It's available to watch now on bendingsteelmovie.com and other VOD sites and services. It's directed by Dave Carroll, and I have an interview with Dave on the site right now. You should check out Bending Steel. That's my indie pick of the week. All right, guys, before we move on into our review of The Diary of a Teenage Girl, we've got to mention our wonderful sponsor, Mubi. This episode is sponsored by Mubi, a curated online cinema that brings its members a hand-picked selection of the best independent, international, and classic films. Every day, Mubi's curators introduce a new title, and you have 30 days to watch it. That means there are always 30 wonderful films to enjoy, all for only $4.99 a month. Plus, when you use their mobile apps, you can download films to watch offline. Mubi is your passport to the world of cinema, and it's a wonderful service, Ananda. I've actually used it, and I love it. And right now, just recently, as we record this, they've posted Jem Cohen's Museum Hours, a wonderful, wonderful movie about a Viennese museum patrolman and a Canadian tourist who walk through this this Viennese museum and like have ruminative conversations and existential conversations, a la like the Before series by Richard Linklater or Lost in Translation by Sofia Coppola. I love these kinds of movies. I love the Before series, and Museum Hours is kind of like those movies, except it's with like an older generation, from an older generation's point of view. Gorgeous movie, and you've seen this as well, right, Ananda?
I have not.
Oh, dude, you gotta watch it. It's so
Okay.
good. It's
I will totally
beautiful.
do it. Cool.
Beautiful, beautiful movie. And they actually did film inside this museum, and you get to see these pieces of art photographed and filmed in a gorgeous way. And there are even like little asides throughout the movie that are nonfiction asides, like documentary asides in the middle of the narrative. So it's really fascinating. I recommend that. That's playing on Mubi right now. Guys, if you haven't tried Mubi yet, please, you got to give it a shot. Way Too Indie listeners can try out a month of Mubi for free. Just go to Mubi.com. That's MUBI.com/way too indie to try your free month. It would help Mubi out. It'll help us out a great amount. We'd appreciate it if you, give it a free go for a month. It won't cost you anything, and it'd help us out a lot. So, guys, go check out Mubi. Wonderful service. Let us know what you think. All right, guys, without further ado, let's get into our review of Marielle Heller's The Diary of a Teenage Girl. And Ananda, I know you happen to have the movie's press notes in front of you, so we can get into those.
It just so happens I do. And I'm happy to read the synopsis of this film. Like most teenage girls, Minnie Getz, played by Bel Powley, is longing for love, acceptance, and a sense of purpose in the world. Minnie begins a complex love affair with her mother, played by Kristen Wiig's boyfriend, the handsomest man in the world, Monroe Rutherford, played by Alexander Skarsgård. What follows is a sharp, funny, and provocative account of one girl's sexual and artistic awakening without judgment.
Now, Ananda,
Mm-hmm.
would you agree that this is a sharp, funny, and provocative account of one girl's sexual and artistic awakening?
I would. I would agree with that.
I like this movie a lot.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so Marielle Heller. This is her debut feature. I
Mm-hmm.
know she went to the Sundance Labs to work on the script, and
Yeah.
she's got a lot of help there, and it shows. This is a really tight, really polished movie. But I insisted on having you on today's podcast, Ananda, because I needed a girl's perspective on this.
Haha. Always happy to be the token female.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I love this one, and I actually, I read enough of these press notes to know that Marielle Heller had never made a film before, and like decided to make this film after reading the book that it's based on, Phoebe Gluckner's novel, graphic novel,
yeah,
and
novel.
I thought that was kind of amazing that she just read a book and was like, "This needs to be a movie. I need to figure out how to make movies." so,
Yeah, it's a terrific debut, and it's set
mhm,
in my hometown of San Francisco.
mhm,
But it's set in the '70s in San Francisco, which of course was a wild time. And sometimes I think movies like this, the when they're like a period piece, it almost seems like the time and place is arbitrary. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really
mhm.
inform the narrative. But I think in this case, it's critical that the story takes place in 1976 San Francisco. I don't think this narrative would work had it been like, let's say, in modern times.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. It makes it a little easier to swallow for sure.
Yeah, like the narrative follows, Minnie, played by Bel Powley, who enters into a romantic relationship with Skarsgård's character, who is like significantly older than her. Minnie's like 15.
Yep.
Uh, so it's essentially this adult man having sex with his girlfriend's 15-year-old daughter.
Hmm.
Uh, but, and I think we would only accept this in the way the movie presents it if it were in like the freewheeling uh, time period of 1976 San Francisco.
True.
I think otherwise it would enter into a conversation of pedophilia, which this movie actually does not participate in.
Right. I do have some thoughts on that, but
Do tell.
um interestingly, I mean, okay, so I don't want to like immediately jump, on top of this film like that. I do want to say first that how much I love this movie and think that the performances are fantastic, and that anything that showcases female sexual appetite in realistic terms is definitely needed on film right now. I think that it needs to be shown that at all ages, women have as voracious as desires as men do, and that it's totally natural and like something we need to be more open to.
Yeah.
I also really like the realistic sex in this film. It's not graphic, but it's messy and real, and I appreciate that as well. Another thing that I think Hollywood sensationalizes, romanticizes
Not
what
erotic
sex
at
is
all.
like.
It's not
Not
erotic.
erotic. No, exactly. Not erotic, but totally real. So, and then also Bel Powley, need to give her a shout out because this girl has a real body, and we need to see more real bodies also on film, which is great. And people who are comfortable, like kind of like Amy Schumer, these days. Like I love that she's just so like, this is what I look like, and I'm pretty happy about it, and I'm totally about that. Only thing I will say is now that we get to see more sexual awakening type stories from a female perspective, which is great because it's usually from the male perspective, and these girls are represented as like ideals, and it's not very healthy. Um, I just don't know if I like that in these stories now from the female perspective that there's kind of more than a whiff of victimization. And yes, I agree that what you said, that this isn't like straight pedophilia, but I would love it if a girl could have this experience and have this story and not be taken advantage of, because he is definitely, you know, 15, 16, 17 years her senior and a male. And in that situation, it's always, in my eyes anyways, and the way I feel about this, like just always seems kind of wrong that no 15-year-old girl, even one who's going through tons of sexual transition, could possibly be an advocate for herself in that situation where an older person is sort of taking advantage. And I agree with, I've heard what Marielle Heller has said about Minnie's character not being a victim because she doesn't view herself as a victim. But I take some issue with that because I don't think that all victims know they are victims. And that's not the point of this movie. And I know I'm like kind of, maybe making more of something than like she intends or the author intends and all of that. But it's the only part of this film that did not sit right with me.
Yeah, it's a touchy thing. But I do admire that, and you'll hear later on in the show when I'm speaking to Marielle Heller that I admired that she presents this scenario with with this 15-year-old girl and this 30-something man, and most movies would enter the blame game that is inherent in that scenario, right? Like there people, everyone's going to be opinionated about what's going on in this movie. But I don't think Marielle is. I think she presents this situation matter of factly. She doesn't accentuate any of the drama unnecessarily, or the like we said, she doesn't present Powley erotically for a second in this whole movie. Nor does she Alexander Skarsgård for that matter. I think she's pretty tasteful there, but I think what's natural is that we as the audience do start, participating in that blame game and start discussing after the movie. So your issue with the movie was that you thought she was portrayed too much as a victim or not enough?
Okay. I guess the right way to put it is that I don't think I view her as a victim. What I find fault is that that it took away some of her control of her own sexual awakening, that an older person was taking advantage of her sexual awakening. I enjoy sexual awakening stories a bit more when it's like they're the lead, they're the ones experimenting and trying and like emoting and having all these feelings and figuring it out, and no one's taking advantage of them in the process. And that's the only part of this where
interesting.
Yeah, so I love that she is the lead in her sexual desires. I love that she like expresses them and like wants to act on them, and she wants to experiment with that. She's the one who initiates the relationship with Monroe in the story, and I think that's fine. I would have loved to see him just turn it down and her like go on to like experiment with some other teenagers or something, but that's not the way the story goes. And I also really appreciate that she is like accurately portrayed, and that I don't think most young women, especially 15-year-old women, have the emotional maturity to separate sex and emotional intimacy. I just don't think that's something that they are all aware of that's going to be a part of it. And heck, I think that's actually a lot of adult women too, which you can kind of see within her mother's character, right? That her mom is also like struggling with being honest with herself about what's happening, and like because she's also having sex with this guy and loves this guy, and she's blind to what's actually going on. But yeah, I don't have any problem with like 15-year-old girl like experiencing sexual urges and experimenting and all of that stuff. All of this is really quite plausible. I just don't like that it took away some of her power to be exploded.
That's interesting. I didn't get that. That wasn't the impression I got watching. To me, she seemed like the predator. Between her and Monroe, she always seemed like the predator to me, and him as the one being exploited. Because she's just relentless in her pursuit. It's actually sometimes kind of funny how she that note that she leaves on his car. When he was just so funny to me. That note, I know you think I'm fat. Note,
that's an emotionally driven note. That's her infatuation speaking. Not her sexual desire speaking necessarily. Which at that point she can't really like separate the two.
There's a scene later where they're together at his place, I believe, and he's trying to kick her. He's trying to drive her home, and she is not letting go of the fact she wants to stay. She wants to stay, and Monroe at one point, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but he screams at her, "This is wrong. You're a child. We
Yeah.
need to stop." And she, of course, finds a way to, get him back into bed, I think, and keep
Yeah.
the affair going, which I thought it was fascinating because Powley, um, at once seems like both a kind of intimidating predator and a lost puppy, like like at the same time. And
Yeah.
the also the fascinating thing that plays into that is that Monroe, I think, well, you'll hear more about this in our conversation, me and Marielle's conversation, but the size discrepancy, the physical size discrepancy between Belle and Alexander is so gigantic. But
Mhm.
as the story progresses, you begin to realize that as far as their emotional maturity, they're pretty much the same age.
It's true.
That's fascinating.
It's true. And I hope you're understanding. I have no problem with her character at all. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly his character and the fact that he's, he's too emotionally immature to realize that he's supposed to be the adult, and the adult is always supposed to say no. No
Right, right,
matter
right.
no matter how hard they're being pursued by a 15-year-old girl who's horny as hell, you're still supposed to say no.
Yeah, he's
Like
weak. He's a
I
weak person. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
What did you think of Kristen Wiig? I think she adds a lot to this movie.
Oh yeah, I thought she was wonderful. I've loved like so many of her latest roles as she's getting more serious. Um, but obviously there's a lot of exploration as to like how we sort of the main message in the end is about how we view ourselves and value ourselves, and if we do it through the lens of another person, like a male person, or if we do it like through our own lens and how we choose to view ourselves and what we choose to take pride in. And I mean, her mother is kind of the one who takes pride in herself through how men view her, and like really thinks it's a big deal that she was hot shit when she was younger, and she still uses that like power that she has, but it's sad, and you see it like play out as sad. But I also love the way she loves her daughters, that she doesn't compromise on that necessarily, even as she's making questionable parental choices. And
Yeah,
yeah.
and that goes back to the time and place again, the period aspect of this story,
Mhm.
because I think back then in the 70s in San Francisco, it was almost a time where parents lived as if they weren't parents. They
Yeah.
had kids, but parental responsibility was almost disposable at that at that point in time. It was free love. And
Mhm.
kids were just going out and experimenting themselves, and you see that in this movie. They're almost more like she's more of just a caretaker occasionally to
Yeah.
to her daughters rather than a mother. Although the story does develop from there, and she progresses as a character as well. I thought this was a I'm from San Francisco, and I got emotional watching this movie because San Francisco, as many people know, is going through a big transformation over the past few years. The tech industry is just taking over our beautiful city and ruining it,
Oh.
in my opinion. Everyone's being
Mhm.
pushed out. And watching this movie, it reminded me of the old San Francisco. I'm more familiar with San Francisco of the 80s, of course. I'm in my 30s. So, but the San Francisco of the 80s was great. It was so weird, and it was a different light. Everything was kind of golden and warm, and now everything kind of just starting to look like New York and got a little more sterile.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Marielle, and she's like about our age, Ananda. So she didn't grow up in the 70s either, but I think she captured the essence of San Francisco in a way that most people whose story takes place in San Francisco get it wrong. The Diary of a Teenage Girl is out in theaters now. Guys, go watch it, please, and let us know what you think. And I'd also like to add that this is a comic book movie, and not all comic book movies are superhero schlock.
Yeah.
And
No
comic
kidding.
books can be, it's a great medium and a
Mm.
storytelling platform, and I think this movie is a testament to that. Okay, so after a small break, Ananda and I are going to be back to expand the conversation and talk about women in film and whether they're represented duly right now in movies. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. We'll see you guys soon.
You take what's mine.
Hey guys, we're back, and after talking about The Diary of a Teenage Girl, we thought we should, talk more about women in film. Even, as a male who consumes movies and TV, it's super noticeable to me that women are not being represented as they should in media and in storytelling. It's really bothersome, and even as a minority, Asian representation, is a joke as well. But for women, I think it's just been this thing where for the longest time it's been more about women being sexualized in movies, and that's like their value, like that's like their baseline value as far as the industry of it. And although I think people are starting to get more and more angry about this, I don't think we're making as much progress as we should be. Would you agree, Ananda?
I would agree.
Yeah, it's kind of an ugly thing. You have a stat for us here that's pretty infuriating. Why don't you share that with us?
Yeah, we should talk about this report that everyone's discussing that came out last week through the USC Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism that talks about how among the top 100 grossing films of 2014, less than one third of all speaking characters were female. 26.9% were of underrepresented racial or ethnic groups, and less than 0.5% were LGBT identified. And apparently no transgender characters whatsoever last year, which we're definitely at least got one this year, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. But yeah, these are pretty sad numbers. I don't think anyone here is going to be super surprised to hear that Hollywood is young, male, straight, and white. We know that. And I think we should all be trying to change that
I
as
think we should be
much as we
angrier.
can.
You know what I
We
mean?
should be angry.
It pisses me off. It pisses me off. I'm not even a woman, but it pisses me off. I know a few podcasts ago I unleashed a little rant about that as well. How I can almost not. I don't support that minorities like Asians and Indians are woefully underrepresented in cinema, but the fact that women are just as underrepresented and they're not even a minority
Mm-hmm.
is crazy.
No, we're literally half the population.
Yeah.
We're right
okay, so let's
here.
look into this. Why is this? I think this is, I think this started because our society has been sexist for, since the beginning of time, basically. And now that the internet age has come and we're starting to spread more progressive ideas and we're starting to spread philosophies of equality, we're starting to creep towards equality in all aspects of culture. And, it's just this glacial progression that I think now, because we can spread our ideas so quickly on the internet, I think there's no excuse that the state of female representation is still so terrible and antiquated. I don't get it.
I think there's a very obvious reason here that is, that Hollywood is a business and is therefore run by business people, mostly businessmen. And I think that's the start of it, that the people who get to make the decisions about which films go forward and which do not, and who stars in what, are these older white dudes who are making the decisions and putting people on payroll. But I think we're definitely proving here lately with, The Hunger Games is sort of an
Sure.
obvious one because it's a female starring blockbuster hit film franchise. I think we're proving that there's women can bring in money. That's
Yes.
definitely, and if that's the bottom line, if that's what it takes, then yes. And also, there's 50% of the population are these females who will go to these movies, but they want to go and see something where they see themselves reflected on screen. They don't understand. It's just, I can get behind an action film or any kind of male-led film, sure. But if I see someone that looks like me on there,
Mm-hmm.
I'm especially intrigued. I want to see these women in all these same roles. I want to see a female who's a boxing star, who's making a comeback. I want to watch that movie, sure. I want to see anything you can picture, like a high-powered lawyer on the run, or a super spy agent. All of these movies that have very historically male leads, I would love to see a female in any of them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So what do we do, Ananda? Because you know what it is that there are these kind of out of touch old white guys running the studio system. That's true, but I think it's also that this is not some our society is super sexist and racist, and I think change as far as kind of updating the larger consciousness is not going to happen overnight. We're conditioned to gravitate more towards male-led properties. Even females are. It's just how we've been raised, and the movies that have been presented to us. It's a subtle thing. It's going to take a lot of work, and
Yeah. Well, I want
it's
to.
step by step, right?
Right. I mean, I want to encourage more women to seek out these films and like pay attention to these little
Right.
films. I hope that like as a website we try to highlight the female roles and female led films. Basically, I think it's important that we're having a conversation about it at all, and that a continuing conversation and a louder conversation will eventually break through and help make some headway in this, amongst the chieftains up there who are making these sorts of decisions. I'm going to continue to go to all these films, and actually pay money, which I don't always have to pay money for movies. So when I do, I really try to be deliberate, and I made the time to go see Trainwreck, and I will make the time to see Mistress America and Grandma, which comes out next week, which we didn't even talk about women past 40 in films. That's even a like worse off demographic.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to encourage everyone else to do the same. And like, let's not complain about how there's female Ghostbusters, you guys. Like, that's stupid. It doesn't matter that they're female.
Yeah, and another thing I did want to touch on that kind of I think about occasionally and bothers me is that when we're talking about character actors, uh, like female character actors almost don't exist. There are a handful of them, and most of them are quite beautiful, that ties into. I mean, I'm not just saying that as a shallow, like
Yeah.
comment. On, when you look at guys and male character actors like Steve Buscemi uh, and like Danny DeVito, like these are. I mean, I love. They're some of my favorite actors, but honestly, like they're not attractive people conventionally,
Mhm.
but they get great roles. Steve Buscemi has had a tremendous career, and I don't see Hollywood supporting older, not conventionally attractive female character actors. I don't think many of them exist. And when they do exist, they always have to be as a requirement. They have to be at least fairly attractive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's pretty ridiculous to me. I mentioned before we started recording, Ananda, that Parker Posey is a great female character actor, beautiful
Yep.
lady, and who else? I think Kathy Bates is probably the closest one to who I would say is like representing what I'd like to see more of in that area.
Maybe like Joan Cusack. She never gets good like lead roles very.
Yeah,
She's always a
but
secondary
she's a great
character.
character actor, though,
She's
right?
awesome. I
She's
love her.
great. She's great. And who else? Who else?
Melissa McCarthy?
Melissa McCarthy, I
Yeah.
think, is gorgeous. I'm sorry, like I
Don't
don't get.
apologize
I
for
mean,
that.
her fucking thing that everyone talks about is how like unattractive she is. Are you
No,
kidding me?
she's beautiful.
She's just like a heavier person. Like she's beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
like
she's
that.
gorgeous. I agree.
But
And super talented.
she's like the spokesperson for unattractive female actors,
Hmm.
which is crazy to me. We need more female Steve Buscemi's.
Female. Oh gosh. I'm just like picturing that blog, Buscemi eyes,
Yeah, yeah.
on
Oh,
all
I
the
love
like
that.
red carpet girls, and they maybe not that literal of this, but yes.
But it's about opportunity. Just women aren't afforded the same opportunities as men in any aspect of life, but especially on the screen, they're just always cast as sexualized, like shitty roles, like Judy Greer, who her roles in the year 2015 are just she right. We were talking about she's just either the mom who's on screen for 5 minutes of a 2-hour movie, or the friend, the best friend of the lead actress.
She's awesome.
Everyone loves her.
Yeah.
Same with Parker Posey.
And like people notice her too. Like when she's the side character, they're like, "Oh, I love that girl," you know. And they may not know her name every time or something, but it's like, "Oh, yeah, her again." We love it when she's in a movie.
Who are some of your okay? So I'd like to ask you, who are some of your favorite female actresses working right now?
I mean, I think Charlize Theron kind of owns this year.
Mm.
I'm obviously big on her at the moment.
Big on Greta.
Greta, yep. I do love Greta Gerwig. Younger female actress Anna Kendrick, I feel like, is kind of an awesome up and comer right now.
Very talented.
Also very talented too. A little like self-aware, and I love that.
Rebel Wilson's another one where it's like, can we just get past the fact that she's like overweight? Like, is that really like all we're gonna talk about? She's so talented. Like I don't get that. That's how she's typecast as the comic relief heavy friend.
Way too often. Yes, this is true.
I think it's demeaning. I don't know. People like seem to enjoy that she's filled that role in Hollywood. I think it's offensive.
I'm happy for her that she's getting roles at all. I agree that she should definitely. I mean, perspective, of course, but yeah, I agree.
Okay,
I would love to see her star in something as well.
That's interesting. So, do you see it as progress that Rebel Wilson's having this success, or do you think it's a step in the right direction?
I think, yeah, no, absolutely. Anytime I get to see anyone that looks a little different in any part of the screen for as much screen time as they're allowed is great. I'm not going to thank everyone like, oh, thank you for giving that woman two minutes of screen time. That was so great and empowering. Like, no, but I think, and you do have to work your way up a little in this industry. I understand how it works. Like Melissa McCarthy 10 years ago, no, she wouldn't have been getting starring roles like she's getting, and now she is getting plenty of movies actually lately that she gets to star in on her own.
I like Spy more now than I did when I first saw it.
I actually haven't seen it yet. I want to though.
It's pretty great, man. It's pretty hilarious, and although it does, still address the fact that she's not the typical leading actress. That's the gimmick of the movie, is that you would never think someone who looks like her would be a spy, but she's gonna, be successful anyways. I mean, I think I'm just tired of it, man. I'm tired of it. Can we just give normal looking people regular roles for once? Like just give them a fucking lead and make them. I think Amy Schumer's leading the charge on that.
Absolutely. She's my hero.
She's everybody's hero.
Yeah. I mean, I know everyone's talking about her, and so it's nothing, out of the conversation right now to say, but I really do appreciate her absolute honesty and just total acceptance of herself, and how she doesn't let anyone make her feel bad about it. She's not trying to be anything other than what she is. Yeah. And man, I've been watching it. Oh, it's fantastic.
And her show's even better.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Amy Schumer lately, and I love her show. I love how smart it is, but also that she's just like, I just like to be funny too, And I love how much she points out that that whole 12 what is it, 12 Angry Men Inside Amy Schumer, whatever.
Oh my God, that was great.
That episode is amazing. It's so fantastic. And I love that she even thought to have an episode based on an old film that a lot of her audience probably wouldn't even understand the reference to. I love that she wanted to make a point of pointing out that should she even be allowed to have a TV show based on how attractive she is, and that's just this huge joke, but it's so totally a relevant conversation. It's
piercing, yeah. It's kind of sneaky. I haven't seen someone be successful at that since Dave Chappelle. I think Dave Chappelle did a great job at that years ago, over 10 years ago. But I think Schumer is the first person to be at that level, social commentary. No one can touch her, really.
I agree.
Yeah, and also what I really enjoyed about Trainwreck was that she was, if we're talking about stereotypes in Hollywood, she was the dude in that movie, and Bill Hader was the chick.
Yeah.
Great. Exactly. It was a rom-com, but it was a gender reversal, which I loved. And it didn't. And what I liked about that was it didn't beleaguer the point. It didn't fucking hit us in the face with that with that fact, this gender reversal. It was just how the movie was. And that's the kind of movie that's going to make progress. Ananda, we've talked about this for a while, and we could probably talk a lot longer. I really care about this, though, and I know, Ananda, you do too. And you guys listening, please continue this conversation. I'm sure we're going to talk about this more on this show, but we have to cut it off there. Ananda, it was great speaking with you, but now we're going to throw to my conversation with the filmmaker and star of The Diary of a Teenage Girl, Marielle Heller and Bel Powley, both incredibly talented people and artists, and I hope you enjoy my conversation. They're lovely and brilliant. Here you go.
Okay. Thank you guys for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed the movie quite a bit, especially as growing up as a boy, a teenage boy. There were a few, I guess, minor revelations.
Good.
Yeah.
What were the revelations?
The biggest one for me was, I guess, growing up as a horny boy, a teenage boy, the sexual desperation of teenage girls. I almost had no idea about how, Minnie's like, I don't know if anyone's ever going to want to sleep with me. I was like, really? you know? I mean, I honestly didn't know girls felt like that.
Well, and I think that's something we were excited to kind of show, because as girls, we never get to see that reflected anywhere.
Right.
And so when you are that teenage girl who's horny and feels like no one's ever going to want to sleep with you, you feel like something's wrong with you, because as a boy, you get to see that everywhere in movies and on TV. It's like, it's everyone's favorite joke is about a teenage boy trying to get laid. But as a girl, you feel like I felt like I was a boy or something because I was thinking about sex.
Wow. Yeah, and I think it's because we don't see that perspective in movies and TV.
Right.
That I didn't know about this. I was kind of amazed. I was like, really?
Yeah.
And it's a common
true.
thing,
Yeah.
I guess.
We also pee and poop.
Yeah, I know.
And fart.
I think your movie kind of highlights how almost other movies about about adolescence and teenage girls kind of hold back the truth, really.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious when you watch your movie. Where do you think that line is? Where is the line that other movies don't cross that yours does?
I think for whatever reason, as a society, we're sort of afraid of teenage girls, and we want to shelter them, and we don't want to think of them as sexual beings. And so we tend to moralize for them. We tend to tell a story that has a really clear ending, where if a girl kind of steps out of line, she's going to be punished. And it's always from the grown-up perspective. I think we don't really do, or especially recently, I feel like we don't kind of respect teenage girls enough to sort of show their stories in a way that is from their perspective. We need to kind of pull back and show the moral grown-up perspective on it. And I think back on John Hughes movies, he really respected his subjects. I mean, 16 Candles or Breakfast Club, these were movies that were about kids, teenagers, but it was showing things from their perspective in a way that was really respectful. But I don't think we do that as much anymore for whatever reason, but especially not for young women.
Yeah, and we like to put young women in boxes and, make them very specific 2D characters. So there's kind of two extremes. It's like the virginal princess who's frigid, or it's like the high school slut. There's no middle ground, and also there's no opportunity to be all of those things at once, which is kind of what you are when you're a teenager. You're just a big mishmash of adult, child, in the middle. You're everything.
There's such duality. I think we were trying to play with that with this character of day by day you go from feeling so in love to so just devastated, and you're so dramatic. Everything is life or death, and you have one foot in your childhood and one foot in your adulthood, and it's just you're flitting between those two things, oscillating constantly.
One thing I enjoyed quite a bit about the movie was the size disparity between you and Alexander. I think it works out really well.
Yeah.
Because at first there's this huge physical size disparity, but then as the story goes on, you realize they're emotionally almost at the same level.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting thing about Minnie and Monroe's relationship is Minnie is really playing at being an adult sometimes, and then sometimes Monroe is kind of regressing and acting like a 15-year-old boy. So there's weird moments during the film where they're actually kind of balanced and it kind of works, and you find yourself like rooting for them, and then you're like, no, what am I doing? I'm sick. And then it goes off kilter again, and that's kind of representative of any relationship, age gap or not. It's like there's always a power struggle, and the balance will shift and change.
Yeah, and it's there's that wonderful shot where Alexander's in your lap, and I think right there is where I just thought the actual disparity between you guys' bodies was just so beautiful, especially in that shot. It was great.
Oh, I love that shot. And it was tough to get, actually, because I had this image in my head of him collapsing in her lap, but when we actually went to do it, he's so giant. It was actually pretty difficult to get him in what could feel like a really collapsed position where you could be sort of above him, taking care of him. But yeah, it's funny. You realize why so many male actors are short, because you tend to cast people who are pretty much the same height. And these guys, I think, had about 15 inches
Right.
difference between them.
And another thing I enjoyed about the movie is that I love your voice. There's like a smokiness to it. I really love that.
I remember actually the moment where I was like I haven't told you this, like in my prep, like 2 months before we started shooting, and I was walking down the street with my boyfriend, and I turned to him and I was like, I think Minnie is gonna have a really low voice. Like, I've decided that now. So like it was definitely like a specific decision, because I've done a bunch of stuff where I've been like criticized for having a really high pitched voice as well. So I like just like decided that that's how she would sound. I think it's also like the way that you hold yourself and the way that you speak when you're a teenager is like a lot less animated and like more kind of like lazy, and like, you know, like your kind of like limbs are everywhere, and like you don't know how to hold yourself, and then the way you speak is like kind of like, oh my god, like I just can't be bothered to speak right now. So that was like I tried to tap back into how I acted when I was a teenager and kind of bring that to me.
And then I know when we recorded the voiceover too, we really tried to get like that quality of being just right there with her, where you were the quality of the recording could feel really, really intimate, like we're almost in her head.
Oh, great.
And then even that feeling, I mean, it also played into how we mixed the movie. So we were very conscious of this, of like, I think Bel and I talked a lot about how that voice would sound and feel, and that she's only really talking for herself, and so it needed to feel like the most kind of intimate way of talking possible. But then when we mixed the film, actually we separated out the voiceover so that it sort of surrounds you in the theater. So if you're listening on a good sound system, it's actually really surrounding you, whereas all the dialogue plays in the front, but the voiceover plays all around. Yeah.
How can you decide that?
That's part of sound mixing a movie, is you pick, if you want to have a car drive by, it could start in the left speakers and zoom by over to the right speakers.
I did not know that.
That's so great.
The things you learn.
Another fascinating thing was that as audience members, I think some people, I think there's an inclination to start playing the blame game in this situation. But the great thing is that you, as a storyteller, don't participate in that.
No.
You present the story, and you let us make that decision. Is it difficult not to participate in that game?
I think it could be, but it was just such a clear directive that I had in my head that I always wanted to be true to telling this story only from Minnie's perspective, and she's not judging herself, and she's not judging the situation, and she doesn't feel like she's a victim. So it was so important that we didn't feel that way. And I think because I made that very clear choice in writing the script, that we were only in Minnie's point of view. There was never a scene that could exist that she wasn't in, because that would break the rules. We had to be only in her experience of the world. That it actually became clear. It became this sort of North Star that I could follow. Is like, where is Minnie emotionally? Where does she feel? And what is she feeling about this situation? And just following that.
I'm from here. I grew up here, and you did as well.
Me
right?
too, East Bay.
Where in the East Bay?
Berkeley, and then Alameda. I went to high school in Alameda.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love Alameda.
Yeah.
I'm from Venetia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of farther out. But I got kind of emotional watching the movie because the city in the past, like, 10, 15 years has just changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really... A lot of people aren't really happy with how it's changing, but your movie kind of brought me back to how it used to be. I mean, I'm more familiar with the 80s version of San Francisco.
Me too. Yeah, and I haven't lived in the Bay Area for, the last 20 years, so I haven't gotten to see all of the ways in which it's changed, except for I come back and spend time with my family all the time. But so for me, it was important to capture sort of my version of what San Francisco was, as well as trying to do historical work and remembering what it was like in the 70s and trying to get the cultural elements of it right, because I think this is a really special place with its own real culture, and it tends to get, I don't think in movies most people kind of get it right, you know. It tends to get a little bit, it becomes sort of like something set in San Francisco, but it really could be set anywhere else, and it's just, they throw in a couple shots of the Golden Gate Bridge or something and say it's San Francisco. But I thought this story is really specifically about this place in the 70s.
100%. And I think what's great also is that the setting, like you said, is sometimes arbitrary.
Yeah.
And it doesn't inform the story. But here it very much informs the story and the time period as well.
Like we did a whole day, just me, Mari, and our camera operator, where I just walked up and down hills. I just walked up and down to like get that feel of what it's like to walk around in the city.
I just had this image where I was like, the truth of the matter is, growing up in San Francisco, you walk hills all the time. You have a backpack on your back and you are trudging up hills, and we need to show that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that talk about that first shot. It's great.
I actually, like, when you were shooting that, I didn't realize how close you were to my ass. Like, and then I watched it for the first time. I was like, whoa, my butt looks big on that screen.
We did a workshop at Sundance at the Director's Lab that was all about opening images. Really? And that's when I came up with that idea that I wanted the whole movie to start on an image of her butt in bell bottoms. Just this swagger of just having had sex, just strutting through the park, feeling so great about herself and like such a woman.
It's a great way to open the movie. I've been a comic book reader for my whole life, as long as I can remember, graphic novels. And I think the thing that I want people to know more is that movies about comic books aren't just about superheroes. You know,
right.
It's a great medium, you know, and it adapts well to screen. Your movie is an example of.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just let people know this is a graphic novel movie, just like any other comic
This is
book.
an incredible graphic novel that I think could speak to a lot of people who might, like you say, not gravitate toward that medium of storytelling because they think it's just about superheroes. And it's also a very masculine kind of genre. It tends to be more boys who read comic books or graphic novels. And I think this is a graphic novel that very much could appeal to boys, but is really, really appealing for girls. And I think there are more and more really cool graphic novels coming out that appeal to girls, but this was one that, I think everyone should pick up. And there's a new edition that just came out, which is really amazing.
That's great. Did they mention you guys?
Yes,
awesome.
It says right on the cover, now a major motion picture.
What do you guys think is Minnie's greatest fear?
I think at the start of the movie, or in the first half, certainly her greatest fear is that she's never going to be loved by anybody. But I think by the end of the movie, she doesn't have that fear anymore because she realizes that she just needs to love herself, and then maybe things will follow, maybe they won't, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like all teenage girls, she has a fear of never being seen or never being able to be accepted for who she is. And she has this sort of warped perspective that's come from her mother that her self-worth is going to be wrapped up in men finding her appealing. And she's been given that lesson over and over again for her whole life, that there's something very materialistic and superficial that she needs to do in order to be loved. And by the end of the film, I think she realizes that she's really artistic and interesting and can love herself, and that can be more important.
Thank you guys so much for the time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, that's going to do it for this week's show. Thanks to Marielle Heller, thanks to Bel Powley, and thanks to Ananda Dillon. Please, guys, go check out The Diary of a Teenage Girl. Ananda and I both highly recommend it. And speaking of Ananda, you can find her on Twitter at Ananda Writes. You can find me at BJ_Boo, and please follow us at Way Too Indie. Like Way Too Indie on Facebook. Follow us on Spotify and Instagram and YouTube, and subscribe to this very show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. It would help a lot, and it would also help if you checked out Mubi.com/Way2Indie. Try that out for free. You owe it to yourself. It would help us a lot. We appreciate you. You're our friends, and we'll see you next week.